through it a little bit, so I like remembered it a little bit, but then George and I got so busy doing a cleaning project this morning that I didn't even like open it up.
I opened it up and I wrote down some names, and then I checked in on the web to figure out how to say her name, Nahari.
Oh, okay. Nahari, yeah.
Nahari. Well, and I said the worst one I looked up, it said Neri. Oh. But then I read, or I looked at a YouTube with her.
Oh, okay, sure.
Author, and she said Nahari.
So okay,
that's what we're going with.
Okay.
So, but I thought, Hattie, first, I don't actually know, why did you pick this book? Because I know you were excited about it, but I don't even know where it came from.
Honestly, I don't remember exactly where it came from, but I think what happened was Liz's bookshop downtown, whenever I go down and buy books at the local shop down there, she always throws in like the flyers for like stuff that's coming out and like new stuff and indie stuff and like a whole bunch of different like book flyers. And I'm pretty sure, although I'm not 100% sure, that I saw it in there, and there was like, you know, had the like the little synopsis about it. And I was like, oh, this is like Egypt and Middle East, which is like, you know, totally up my alley. But then it was also like very like fantasy-y. So I was like, oh, maybe Hannah would like it too. So then that was why those two things, because there was like a me thing and a Hannah thing. So I was like, maybe we might both like it.
Well, and I was wondering, because actually this is the first of a trilogy.
Yes.
And the trilogy came out last year or early this year, I think. The third. I'm sorry.
The third one.
The third. Yeah, I wonder if you actually saw the third one, read it, and then realized that this was the first one. No?
Nope. No, this is the one that I saw. I don't know if it was in, maybe it wasn't in a flyer. Maybe it was on a book list on Pinterest. I cannot remember. It was a long time ago.
It's really interesting.
This book. It was like in the springtime. Right. So I don't.
Well, that's the only reason I wouldn't think it was on a flyer, is because it's not.
No, you're right. This one isn't the newest one.
Because the third one came out this year.
So that was, yeah, I think it was just like the whole like Egypt, Middle Eastern stuff, like was like super intriguing for me. And then it was like all fantasy stuff, which was like, Hannah like that. Oh, yeah, so it was like the mix of those two things.
Yeah, and with a female protagonist as well.
Yeah, awesome. Exactly.
Yeah. And I was also going to ask you.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about this, obviously, this morning. This is all, by the way, this is as much effort as I gave to it was in the shower, just to be clear.
Okay, just to be clear, that is way more effort than I put into it, because I spent the morning cleaning the walls in my living room. So that's how I spent my morning. So I did not think about this at all.
No, that's totally fine. So my other question for you around this was around fantasy itself, because I know fantasy isn't your like fave, but you are married to a fantasy lover and you're the sister of a fantasy lover.
Indeed.
And so I was curious if you've ever read like Middle Eastern fantasy before, like that's built on this kind of a world.
Yeah.
Or this was your first foray into that.
This is definitely not my first foray. I'm not going to be able to like come up with stuff off the top of my head, but like a lot of like the terms of like the fantasy creatures were totally like, oh yeah, I know what that is. I know what that is. I know what that is. Like, so it wasn't like brand spanking new like terminology. I mean, some of it was like new just because I hadn't heard of that particular you know creature before, or that particular you know ghost goblin / you know netherworld animal thing before. But I don't know that I would say anything it was like particularly fantasy, but I do think in a lot of the Middle Eastern like fiction that I've read, these kinds of creatures are part of the story, whether they're part of the story as in like they're real in the story, or if they're part of the like the mythology that like is being told, say like you know by the elders to the you know next generation or something like that. It's always sort of like in the background. But how about you? Because I think you told me that like this was sort of your first.
It's my first one in that the fantasy creatures are actually the subject of the story. So it's not my first on this type of a world. So in my young adult fantasy, the couple I've read are We Hunt the Flame, which I'm rereading as a duology. I'm rereading the first We Hunt the Flame right now because I want to read the second one, which is We Free the Stars. And then the other one, the other series, and it's 4, is Ember in the Ashes. series. And they both sit on these kind of creatures. So versus like the white Western male fantasy world of like elves and dwarves and
this particular subset, because you're right, like there's like, sort of this white Western male subset, which is, everything from like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, right?
Right. I mean, which Tolkien is like the quintessential one, right? Like,
I don't know if he was the creator of it all necessarily, but definitely like the one that like everybody's most familiar with.
But these are definitely like, this fantasy world is definitely a very different. It requires a little bit more. Now that I've read more of it, it's not as hard, but like it does. The first couple, I was like, what are these people? What are these things?
Yeah. Did your book, I think you have the same one as me. This is the thing that I was sort of annoyed by. The glossary is in the back.
There's a glossary?
Yeah, of the beings, but it's in the back.
Oh.
So I didn't even know it was there until I finished the book. So it would have been nice.
There's all the words.
But I did not even know that it was here.
No.
In the back of the book. So just editorially, it would have been nice if the editor had said, you know what, maybe these people need to know that this is in this book before they start this book.
Right. Yes.
So it would have been nice to know.
Yeah.
That was there.
Agreed. Okay. So general impressions.
Okay. So I would say generally, I felt like this book was good.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed reading it.
It was entertaining.
Yeah. But it wasn't great. And I didn't like finish this one and then like run to the library to get the next one because I've seen them at the library. So I know they're there. Because I wasn't like pulled in to the story as much as like some other stories, that I haven't pulled into. But it was fun to read. Like I liked it. I liked the world. I liked the setting. I thought, I don't know if I'd say I didn't dislike the main character, but she wasn't particularly endearing to me.
I would agree with that. I actually liked Ollie better.
Yeah, he was a little bit more interesting, right? Yeah, he was. And then I also sort of didn't love her counterpart, the Jinn.
Dara?
Which I'm not sure we're supposed to love, but...
No, I'm not sure. Dara, I'm not sure which...
Yeah, I was saying Dara. Yeah, so Nari and Dara, who were sort of like, those main characters that you're following throughout the whole book, neither one of them, like, hooked me.
Right. What's really funny is, I was going to tell you about this because it took me a really long time to like it, to get to the point where I was like, oh, now I want to read it. And I was giving it until Ollie and Nahari were together, because I knew that was like, because they have their separate chapters. I knew that was going to happen. It doesn't happen for a really long time.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure exactly, but like at least 2/3, maybe.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It must be at least
over half. And then as soon as they get to, like, as soon as they're in proximity to each other and having that kind of a weird relationship, and I did enjoy I found that much more endearing than Dara and Nahari, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's more interesting, right? Because it wasn't just sort of like your normal,
like, you're just like super hot and I just need to jump you all the time.
Yeah, I know. And it's sort of like, been there, done that. It's just not that interesting. That's exactly. It's like not that interesting of a story there. But but Ollie and Nahari, like, they're weird, like they don't even like want to have to be in each other's presence, so we're having to like work through that. And
but they actually like the same things, and they're surprised by each other, and they are like intellectual equals in many ways, which, okay, that's not surprising that the two of us would find that particular relationship more interesting. Than not surprising. But I think at that point, when that was starting to happen, that was when I was getting more interested. And I would say the last quarter of the book, like, I was like, what is happening in the end, which I'm not going to spoil.
Don't spoil it.
I'm not going to spoil it, but I will say the ending was like,
what just happened?
Now, at the same time, I did not go and get the second book right away, only because I have so many books to read. I will read the rest of the series, I think. And I said this to you, I think I'll buy this series, continue to buy this series in paperback, and probably keep it on my shelf, because it'd be like one of those series that's like, I just need something fun and easy that's like entertaining, that's not super, like, doesn't require a ton from me. And this would be a series that I could do that with for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think like I don't think I'll buy the others. I think when I'm feeling like I want to read something that's going to be like just kind of easy and a good entertaining book, I'll just go to the library and like get, you know what I mean? Because I know they're at our library. The other thing I was just thinking as you were talking about like keeping them on your shelves, I was thinking like this is actually, I feel like this would be a series that would be good for like high school age kids who are good readers.
Yes. And by the way, Hattie, I'm just going to tell you this. I know you don't like just read straight up YA fantasy, but it is not what they call high school YA fantasy now is not much different than this, other than the characters are younger. That's it. Everything's exactly the same. Relationships, the way they talk about like sexuality and sex. I mean, some of them have sex in them.
It's the teenage angsty stuff that like really gets on my nerves.
Yes.
Because like even with that one we read last year, Hannah, you remember the one we read it in September? It was the one about the two girls who fall in love, Fire and Stars. Because like I think that was like a good story. Like I actually like enjoyed the story, but there was like they were so young and there was like it's like the teenage angsty stuff that just like it annoys me to the point where I'm like,
that is true.
I have a hard time like enjoying it sometimes because of the teenage angst stuff. And like this one she was a little angsty, but not terrible. And like Ollie,
I felt like she knew who she was, except she didn't know who she was.
Except for that she ended up not, which is like thinking she did,
very confusing. And I'm intrigued again. It'll be interesting to see how that develops because of some of the stuff that happens in the second half of this book, that changes the trajectory of identity that she was on,
that she thought she was on.
And her idea of, I did find this interesting. I just thought about this. Her idea of home throughout the book, and Egypt continuing to be home for her.
I think that was a theme that she really actually did a good job of like hearing it throughout the book. And I think like even at the end, I think it's still sort of like, where is home for her? You know what I mean? Like she's not.
Well, and actually kind of for Ollie too, really, when you think about it, like that. And again, I found his familial, I mean, I'm not huge into like political intrigue. That's like that's not the kind of fantasy that I enjoy most of the time. Although I have to say in this particular book, maybe it was because it wasn't central. It was like adjacent. Like him and his siblings and his mom and his half siblings. And like, I found some of that intrigue and like the ways in which that was going to play out. I did find it intriguing. Like I was like, what's happening here? And I did find that a little bit more intriguing than I usually do. I don't love political intrigue. Like that's not.
But that was the other thing that I do think she did in this book. And I don't know if she did it on, I would say she probably did this on purpose, but I do think a lot of the social issues, right, that Ollie is sort of butting up against, you know, with the way his father's dealing with it. And then like the way his brother is sort of coming into his own to figure out how to deal with it and how Ali is choosing to deal with it. I think a lot of those social issues are very like, I mean, I think they're meant to be like, sort of like, obviously like, this is how it is in our world right now. And we need to do better. You know,
full on social commentary. Like it is
full on social commentary. And like the racism stuff, even with the racism, you know, because the different kinds of beings and the
religion, the zealots.
And the religion. Faith. And like the poor people, you know, like not having access to resources and you know, Ali trying to get them resources and then the consequences of those kinds of actions too. For him. And I think that's always that's something that gets lost. Like oftentimes generosity is only just praised without understanding that there are sometimes negative consequences on the side of that. You know?
And I will also say she did a great job of not making, other than the Ifrits, possibly, and I think that that's going to get more complicated probably in the future ones. But like, no one is pure evil.
Is evil.
And I mean, and everybody just makes good or bad choices, and all choices have consequences to the larger. These are people in power, and their choices have consequences in a wider way. And I thought she did such a good job, and a good job of making it. So I actually liked Ollie's dad. I liked his sister, who was a total B-face a lot of the time, but yet you could understand where it was coming from, and you had a heart for her, and for the brother, and
Well, in Dara, right? But I was also thinking like Dara, in particular, because like Dara is sort of like from the beginning, like you're supposed to sort of like Dara. Like Dara is a goodish character. I don't know if like is quite the right word, but like Dara is supposed to be like a good character, I think, for the first half of the book, right?
Definitely for the first half of the book, that is.
But then when they get to the City of Brass, it's like everything just sort of like explodes, and it's like, wait a minute, what the heck?
Which really, in thinking about it that way, intriguing is like that is how it happens for Nahari, right? Like she is with Dara until in relationship with all of this other political and communal historical reality. And then he doesn't look quite so much as the savior that he is played up until that particular point in the book. And now like he's a lot more complicated.
Yeah. Reluctant savior, I think, for sure, but also like an endearing reluctant savior. And then it's like you get all this other history and this other perspective on Dara all of a sudden. And then it's like, wait, what?
And his response, like centuries later, right? Like in the level of pain and anger that is still present. And again, commentary, right, on generational war. And conflict, even if it's not all out war, but generational conflict. There's a lot of good stuff in it.
Yes, there is. I agree.
But it's definitely one of those books, like if you like fantasy, if you have never read a fantasy book built on this mythology, read the glossary. Know that it's there.
Back. Yep, and it's in the back. Just make sure it's there. Go back, look at it. Because honestly, if I had known it was there were multiple times that I would have been like, oh yeah, I just need a reminder which.
But yeah, I mean, it is super entertaining. Like there's nothing about it that's like, well, that was dumb.
Yeah. Like I feel like I got done with it and I said to George, I was like, George, I think you would like this.
I think George would like that.
Like, I feel like it's not hard to read. It moves along. It's fat, so you need something that moves along when it's that fat if you're gonna stick with it. I think
I enjoyed her world building. I thought it did. She did a nice job of keeping the pace, even though it took me a long time to get through the first half for sure.
So I don't know, we'll see if I do feel like it'll be like one of those like middle of winter, I'll be like, I'm not sure what I want to read, and then I'll like go to the library and I'll be like, you know what, maybe I'll pick up that second one. That's kind of how I feel. You
could just finish this and be done.
And be okay.
And it there's a satisfaction to the finishing of this book, right? Like, and I do think that's part of like why I also was like, I don't have to go read the next one right away, because there was an ending.
This part of the story has ended. Yeah, I concur.
So I did like that too.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you this question: what is your favorite fantasy book?
I
actually feel like I know the answer to that.
Well, I feel like the only fantasy book that I would even say like I've read more than one time is The Hobbit.
That's what I was going to say.
Exactly.
That was what I was going to pick for you too, by the way.
Yeah, honestly, like that's like the only one that I would say is like a favorite in any way, shape, or form. That's like full on like fantasy stuff. And I mean, and like Harry Potter doesn't really count, does it? It's not even fantasy, or is it fantasy?
No,
I don't know. I also get like.
Yeah, no, magic would be considered fantasy. Yep.
Okay. Because I do love Harry Potter, but I love Harry Potter, the story from like beginning to end. Like I have a favorite movie, right? But I don't know that I'd say that's my favorite book.
Right.
I don't know that I could pick a favorite book. I don't think they stand alone in my brain. But honestly, I don't have much of a repertoire of stuff that I've read in the fantasy genre. To be fair, it's real small.
Real small.
Well, what about you though? Like, what would be your like favorite fantasy book? Because your repertoire is enormous.
I have a very large repertoire of fantasy, but what's really funny is as I was asking you, and I was like, I knew what yours was.
Yeah, you're like, well, no, Hattie is. So
almost every single one that I was picking out, it's all sci-fi.
You like this?
Like my favorite ones are much more sci-fi, speculative fiction than actual fantasy.
Yeah.
This is when I went to Gen Con. I think I only ever went once, right? I think I only ever went that one time.
Yeah, maybe you only went once. I've gone at least 2, maybe 3 times, but.
And there was a book signing thing. And George told me I needed to buy this book. And I was like, George, that's the fattest book in the whole world. Let me just show you how fat this book is.
Nice.
I'm like, there is no way I am ever going to read that.
No.
And I got it signed, but it's called The Annotated Chronicles. It's Dragonlance, part of the
Dragonlance. Oh, yes, by Margaret Rice and Tracy Hickman. I'm sure we have that on our shelf.
No, you do. You do.
Okay.
Fantasy is my entertainment.
Yeah.
Sci-fi is my thinking stuff. And fantasy is like just fun and
it's just like the fun stuff.
Yeah.
It's like your beach reads. That's what I always call it. That's what like I call my
your historical fiction.
Yeah, my historical fiction, or even like my Victorian detective stuff. That's like my beach read, right? Like air quotes, but like that's beach read. By the way, I have read Chronicles of Narnia.
I have never even finished Chronicles of Narnia.
That's fantasy. I mean, I like Chronicles of Narnia, but I don't know what I'd say is like my favorite read or anything. I mean, The Hobbit is like, there's just no getting on that. But
there's no. I might have to think about this a little bit more because there is just so many too.
But I do think this was like a good foray into it. I do think there was like something for both of us in this book.
Yeah, there was definitely something for both of us in this book. I think, it's entertaining.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Honestly, if you can finish a book and you're like, that was entertaining.
That was entertaining.
Like, that's enough because you can't, I can't read books that change my worldview all the time or like.
It's too much. That's too hard. That's too heavy. Yeah.
Absolutely recommend it. If somebody was like, oh, it looks intriguing, give it a shot.
Yeah,
like, I think
exactly. Like, I finished it and I'm like, oh, I think George would like it. You know what I mean? So it's like, I always feel like if you end a book and you're like, okay, I was entertained. Like that wasn't painful at all. And I would recommend it to a person in my life.
Right.
Then usually that means, it was a winner.
It was a winner.
Overall.
So, overall, winner.
Winner.